other announcements or community things you guys want to bring up?
There's a meetup after Ruby Hack tomorrow night. There's like a sponsored thing, but you can go if you're not going to the conference, I believe. Like, you won't get free drinks or whatever, but
if there's enough people in town who don't drink, you could probably get their tickets. Yeah, that's, let me find some details on that.
Sponsored by Drip somewhere down that I didn't recognize.
Drip at the Fisher Brewing Company, 320 West, 800 South. It's in that's like that granary district, well, just east of it, but yeah. Yeah. So anyway, 6:30 to 9 if you want to just go hang out more casually with other programming folk. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you. I think you're good to go. I started the broadcast there, so I'm going to mute myself. And
do I need to do anything else? All right. So I'm going to give a talk on command line applications in Ruby. My name is Matt. I work at Acima as well. Consult for Struct. I got a solid dad joke game, which you're going to see throughout this talk, and the Space School on the internet. So this talk is it's secondary teaching. I'm not command line application expert. This is all stuff that I've picked up from other people's presentations or blog posts or writing or just reading through some of the code bases that we're going to be looking at. I think it's important that, like, not everyone presenting is coming from some place of being an expert, and that we're all still learning everything that we're doing. And it's not a bad idea to actually present on a topic that you're not an expert on. So Johnny and Hector and Danny in particular, if you guys just want to present on something sometime and it actually help you learn a lot more about it and stuff. We're all learning. We're going to overview some basic concepts, but I'm actually going to reference another talk and a book to kind of cover general basic concepts of command line apps, introduce some tools from the Ruby ecosystem, go through some examples, and then code a little app together. Dave Copeland gave a talk that's better than this one called Make Awesome Command Line Apps with Ruby. It's kind of old, but it's still, he goes into a lot more detail on some of the nice things to have about command line apps, some of the guidelines and stuff. He also has a book, Build Awesome Command Line Applications in Ruby, which has it's in its second version, available from Pragmatic Programmers. I have this book, and this is kind of one of the things that got me into this a while ago. Moving on, why do bicycles need kickstands to stand up?
nice.
Because they are too tired.
Nice.
Boom.
Nice thinking.
So there's a couple different kinds of command line apps. We're going to focus on two of the most common types, which are the simple commands and the command suites. So you've got your simple command, which is it just does one thing and does it well. And these are things like ls, where you can list your files, grep, rm. These are just commands that take options. So when you're doing grep some string in a path, like you're giving it the command grep, the options -r, so for recursive, and the arguments some string in path. So this right here, command, which is your application in this case, some options, and then the actual arguments that it needs. Command suites are related collections of commands. So you've like bundle and git and rails. These are command line apps that actually have many commands within them. So bundle has update and list and install as subcommands. It's a suite of commands, which also themselves take options and arguments. So the command suite of git takes commands like push, takes options like force, and takes the arguments of the remote and the branch name. Some quick guidelines on building command line apps. We want to try to make sure that they just sort of work or explain themselves out of the box without much configuration at all, and definitely not code configuration. You don't want to have people have to edit your source in order to get it to do what you want. Handle errors and care about the output. Talk more about that, and then help your users understand how to use your system. So if you do like, if I just type Rails, I'm going to get a bunch of help, like a ton of help. And this is all just for the new command within Rails. If I type get help, I can get information about the version. Like all these well-made command line apps are going to tend to come with help and some guidance for the user, so that you don't have to go somewhere else. I don't know what ls-h might do, but it doesn't have help at -h anyways. Okay, so working out of the box, doing something useful with minimal input. LS does something useful right away, right? You just type it and it'll list your files. It doesn't list it in any particularly great format and doesn't have a bunch of information, but it's just going to list your files. If you give it -L for the log format and A for all, like you're going to actually see some of the hidden files, the dot files, as well as some more information about those files, like what permissions those files have. But it works well out of the box, but then allows configuration all through input without forcing you into an interactive shell or editing anything. It's also got predictable output that can be passed into other things. Respond with useful error messages and guide the user. So when you do ls and you pass a directory as an argument and the directory doesn't exist, it's actually going to give you no such file or directory with the directory that you pass. When we're writing our little scripts, and that's where these command line apps start, is like I'm writing a little script for something. We tend to punt on that error handling and helping the user and push that off completely. And they tend to stay these little scripts. And what I'm talking about is like going past that and starting to build command line apps with the same care that we would give to our web UI. Caring about the output, following some Unix principles, and have clean, readable output that can be extended. Gonna give a big quote right here. This is from Doug McElroy. Expect the output of every program to become the input to another as yet unknown program. Don't clutter output with extraneous information. Avoid stringently columnar or binary input formats. And don't insist on interactive input. You can have interactive input, but don't insist on that. What I mean by that interactive input, I mean is if you do git rebase, you can rebase and it'll just happen if it can, because you can also rebase interactively, which brings you into a system that is now waiting on your next decision. So interactive input is something that like you enter in to a running application that's still in its loop that is now waiting on you to continue it and continue giving it commands and stuff. Whereas non-interactive input is like, I'm going to pass you args at the command line and that's it. You're going to break or not based off that. So don't insist on interactive input, but he's not saying don't allow it. Why can you never trust atoms? Because they make up everything. Boom. This is going to keep happening. This is going to keep happening the whole time.
Like he would have gotten it if he waited a few more seconds.
There is no time to get it. I need to.
Okay.
All right. All these files are in my top presentation repo. I'll show that at the end. Basic Ruby script just puts hello world. Not lying. This file exists. I wrote all this code by myself. If you run this, what happens is it puts hello world. That's thank you. That's it.
I was equally as impressed by your cursive comments. And I was like, wow.
That I cannot leave this font, even though so Firacode or Firacode, however you say it, I don't know, has these beautiful ligatures that I want in my life, but I have this other font with the prettiest cursive font on the planet, and all my comments are. I want to write more comments
Yeah.
so that I can see, and I'm missing
I would
out.
like to take that out of your presentation in addition to.
It's. I paid money for this font. It's so pretty. Anyways,
Sorry to cut that.
so to run the script, it's just a Ruby file, and we're just going to type Ruby. And so we're right here. Ruby is our command line app, and I'm passing it the argument of this file, and it runs and does that. Pretty simple Ruby script. It can't take any arguments or anything. It's hard coded. That script is actually not an application at all because there is no interaction from the user. It's basically just hard coded data. It's still programming, but it's not an application. Here we've got taking arguments, kind of the most bare bones way possible, where we're actually interacting with argv, which is an array representation of all the arguments you pass to the script. So here I'm looking to see if the first argument passed is -- person, and then I'll use the second argument after that to output that. So puts greeting, and again, I wrote all this code. Don't worry, it's there. That script, and I'll just run it real quick. Ruby. I even put numbers in front of everything, so you can just really have at it if you want to clone this. Passion.person Jane. Hello, Jane. Messing with argv like this is super wrong. Don't even bother. Like if you're writing your quick hot script, sure, but evolve. Like it's low level, it's prone to errors. Like here I've got an example of I'm just passing all these flags, and I puts out argv, and it's all order dependent. Like I could not pass in multiple flags and be checking on arg0 as person. It just gets real bad if you can just imagine an infinite array of possibilities, and you're trying to figure out if they ever put -- person in there and what came after that, and if nothing did come after that, you need to throw an error. Like someone else did that for you, and it's with options parser. This is just a huge improvement over this. If you look at my sweet taking argument script and I run it without anything. Yeah, sorry. I'll do that more often. Just want to get some help information on this. Oh, hello world. Well, maybe it's help. No. Version is this? Nope. Hello world. That's the ghetto world that you're going to be dealing with in argv land. We want to get out of that, and we want to start like having some common things that are already just sort of known about things you're going to do with the command line app, like -v or -- version. Options parser is just should be your default. argv, so if even on that baby little script, just use options parser. It's so easy to use, gives you really nice capabilities for like almost no learning. You declare the options you're going to handle, and you avoid all the low-level stuff. So here's an example of just a basic options parser. I don't have to tell it where it's getting its options from. It just knows how to get to argv by itself. I'm setting up a banner, and then
standard library?
it's part of standard library, not core library. So you have to require it.
Yeah.
It used to be part of core, I believe, but it's one of those like cute side ones that's always there, but you got to say its name first.
I see.
It's cute. It's cute. There's a lot of cute libraries like curses, which we're not going to get into at all. But if you want to go crazy with command line, the curses gem, also maintained by the Ruby core team, is going to give you like basically treat your terminal like a graphical interface. Like that's some other crazy stuff. It wraps end curses. What?
Next month. We can talk about that next month.
I'll give a lightning talk on how to make fireworks tomorrow at Ruby Hack, which it won't be from me. I won't write that code. I will just copy the fireworks thing I saw one time and present it because it's really cool. Okay, options parser. We're going to look at this code right here. So I'm setting up an options hash. That's just my sort of default. of what I'm going to do. This is just part of my script. I'm requiring opt parse. That's part of the, I didn't install that gem. It's part of the standard library, but you have to reference it. And it's well documented out there in the Ruby standard library docs. So it takes, one of the things you can do is banner, and then there's these on commands. There's more that you can do, but I just want to get through showing this. There's a convention to this on. Can I go down some sizes? Like, we're still good. Okay. So I'm telling it that I've got a person flag, that's -- person, and it takes, by doing this all caps thing, I'm saying it takes a person. This is just so conventional within documenting and using options in a command line app that this sort of just happens magically. And this person right here is what I'm going to yield to this block. And this is my description of this option. So the second param to on is the description of that.
Is that self-document? Is that?
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry.
this is a little trick right here in on where I've actually created two different options by using this bracket. So I've actually got -- shout and no -- no -shout, which overrides the previous -- shout. You can actually chain that endlessly, and whoever's last wins. All caps greeting, and what I'm doing here is I'm taking my options, which is this hash that I've set up here, and just manipulating it inside here. This is a pretty standard, like I'm writing a quick script convention of how to interact with options parser. So I've got my default person is world, which doesn't make any sense, but I don't worry about it. And then shout is false, and in here I'm mutating that hash and overriding that if necessary. Parse with a bang, because again, I like to mutate things, and this is a Go script. Setting up my greeting, which just fetches the person out of options, and then if it's shout, you'll see, it's gonna be amazing. Watch this. That's not it for options parser. Hello world. Sorry, it's still our base script is still happening. Invalid option banana, option parser invalid option, because I don't know why, but I don't have a banana flag in there. Let's go back to Jane. We're hello Jane, and then we're going to shout hello Jane. This is maybe the best application we've ever made. Versions unknown. So I still would need to kind of set that stuff up, but it gives me a -h, --help, I think, as well. And this is where like Enhanced Greeting System 2.0, which is an amazing, it sounds like this is gonna be a great app one day when it gets to 3.0, but that's the banner that we set up in options parser. So the banner right here, it knows to kick out when we're doing -h. These are person to greet, again, those descriptions. Person greet, all caps greeting. This is kind of funky if you don't know how that works. Like if you do the Rails help, they do a better job of kind of talking about how no RC and no RC. There's a reason for this. And we're going to actually get into Rails RC commands a little bit later. There's a reason why you would know no, a no, but it looks silly. But there's reasons to like override your overrides. So let's clear again, and we're going to look at this with shout, no shout. So I've overridden the shout. But I can override my no shout to the override and go back to shout. It's pretty cool. And there's like minimal work here to get this nice help system, and it doesn't have versions, but it's so much better than the argv solution. Like this should be how, I'm not going to get into Rake because Rake's this whole other thing, but like if you're writing a script, just use options parser. You'll be very happy with yourself. So far, we've had to type Ruby every time we've wanted to run our command, and that's so that that script can actually be interpreted by Ruby and run. There's this arcane, like most things, when you start getting into the command line world and going a little deeper than Ruby, you're going to enter arcane Unix land that I suck at. So you're going to type stuff like chmod, and you're going to learn the word shebang, which isn't a word, but we're going to use it anyways. And if you look in any sort of Ruby app that's been generated by anything, you're going to find a bin folder usually, whether it's a gem that you started out or a Rails app or whatever. And in here, you're going to be like, well, that's a goofy comment. I don't know why they'd have that. But if you know what this is, then it actually makes a lot of sense. This is telling the world that find Ruby in your system, which is we're using user bin n to try to discover where a Ruby command might live, and use that to run this file. And this is not a Ruby thing. This is a Unix thing. So this could be, like I could say Python in there. The shebang is going to be the same. Most languages, the hash is a way to delineate a comment. So you're going to be fine if you just run this as Ruby. If you ran it, and then the system will also know to run it as Ruby because it reads the shebang. Is this making sense?
The shebang is the hash thing?
Yeah, that's.
Is that what shebang is?
Yes, shebang. Yes.
As I said that.
I think developers are, yeah, hash shebang, and then they're like, I just call it shebang, and then that caught on like big time.
I don't bother to say the hash.
Yeah, it's an octothorpe, bro. So you can see these sorts of files, and it'll have this in here, generate files. Look in bin is where this mysterious stuff. And if you're actually like running the Rails command, you're probably actually running the Rails bin or bin Rails command. You just don't know it because everything's magic. So I've done this to some script somewhere in here in my examples. So this is just the same options parser from before, but now it's got my shebang, and so I can run it by just running the file. I use a dot because it's in my current directory. Normally, I no longer need the RB in order for it to run. This file is named RB, so it needs it, but you can name it a banana and it'll run whatever. Because you're no longer trying to tell Ruby, like, here's a Ruby file, and makes sense. So this is the same file on Take Smart or Shout. Yay.
Did version not work just because it's a keyword?
Version didn't work because I don't have one. I don't have that set up.
But it was a different error besides version and banana.
Version,
It's because it's like a keyword.
I think I typed it like this. No version found impacted version.
Is it maybe because of options parts? Yeah, they might have something.
I can't remember what I typed, but I know what you're saying. It was bigger, right?
One was invalid.
Version unknown.
You have it up there on your dash D, version unknown versus no version found.
Well, the no version found.
I think something
was-
totally
dash banana.
Yeah, banana.
Yeah.
So that's an invalid option. But dash version, I'm just not setting it with options parser. But options parser knows about the idea that dash version would exist.
It's like a keyword.
Yeah, yeah. And I would love to show you like that set up real quick, but I actually don't use options parser much. We're gonna get into higher level tools next. Clear again. To run those files, you actually need to make them executable. So if we look at like the ls earlier, I'm just gonna ls in here. Long format, you can see that this 5 shebang right here, it's executable. It's got the permissions to be executed, whereas these scripts do not. They must be interpreted by Ruby. You need to make it executable if you want to call it without Ruby with the shebang thing, which is chmod plus x go wild. Like I'm not going to tell you about chmod. You're too young. Why do crabs never give to charity?
Oh, because they're shellfish.
Boom!
Yes!
Nice.
I told you I'd catch up. You gave me an extra 2 seconds.
Okay, some more advanced tools moving beyond options parser. I just want everyone to kind of see, like argv, just skip it. Options parser is so easy and it gives you a bunch of wins.
Is it
Next.
using RP? I guess everything.
Yes,
is
yes, yes.
Is that the one way that we can?
That's like Ruby. Ruby's gonna give you that stuff by default in that console. Rake is a very powerful tool. It's the thing that we probably interact with most as Rails developers. If we're gonna do these sort of one-off scripts, it's probably gonna be a Rake task. Rake actually is crazy more powerful than we use it for. We're basically using it so that we don't have to write Ruby script stuff. It's just a nice wrapper for general purpose scripts, but it actually is got insane capabilities of knowing when to like order dependent based off file changes and stuff. I'm not going to talk about Rake at all. So go look at the Rake GitHub repo, and they've got some links to presentations from Avdi Grimm on their README that he walks through kind of the basics of Rake and immediately gets into like some powerful stuff that is just kind of crazy what you can do with Rake. It's pointed at the build tool world. It is the Ruby make, but we use it for all sorts of stuff. You're going to end up, you've probably written a Rake task. Thor is like Yehuda Katz, like bumping up against the limitations of Rake as a command line or a command suite tool, and wanting to make his own tool to build command suites. That's what Thor is. Hanami CLI is a similar, more different take, but on the same sort of thing. They're both gems libraries that help you build command suites. Thor is used in Rails, in Bundler. It's going to be probably the thing that you end up bumping it. Where did template method come from and stuff like that? Thor is going to probably be the one that you're going to see in the mainstream Ruby stuff, and Hanami CLI is like what you're going to see in the dry RB and Hanami, kind of the cool kids smoking out back side of Ruby. I don't know if you know about these two different areas, but the art students are out back and they got that dry RB. TTY is just a bunch of cool little things that you can use to build command line apps. It's not like a suite like Thor. It's like a progress bar or a table generation or color of my output. It's just a bunch of cool little libraries that you can bring into your other command line apps to get cool things. I'm going to show you the sweetest progress bar you've ever seen in a command line app. Coded it myself once again, copyright. Terrapin is one of the many ways out there to talk to the command line from your app. Sometimes you need to call other commands. Terrapin used to be called Cocaine. It's a ThoughtBot gem. It wraps shell commands in like a safe kind of box and can help you do some protection around arguments that you pass to it, and gives you a nice interface to check on the results and rescue against errors and stuff. It's just, rather than going straight to the kernel stuff in Ruby to talk to the shell, it's probably worth looking at something like Terrapin if you need to be doing, like, we mess around with some binaries at work that like run PDF tools and stuff like that we need to shell out. Terrapin's a better way to do that. If you've ever used the Paperclip gem, it uses Terrapin underneath to do some of its image magic stuff. And Aruba is like sort of Selenium type thing for command line apps. It does more than that. It like boxes up all of the file stuff that you do. It's a really great tool to do serious testing of command line apps. It mixes in with Minitest or with RSpec or with Cucumber. Its job is not the assertion library or the mocking or anything. It's just kind of giving you the sandbox and the interactions with the command line to make testing nice. I think that's originally by the RSpec team to kind of get that going. we're going to look at some example apps now. Templar is not an actual application. It was just a cool name I made up for a Rails template, which is just another script. Recrypt is an actual application, and it's last month's presentation done as a command line app in Ruby with some flair so that we can show off some of these tools I was just talking about. Roshanbot doesn't exist. We're going to make it or we're not. I don't know. It depends on the feel of the crowd.
Nice.
But command line app that maybe responds with rock, paper, scissors. And I haven't really thought it out. Templar, basic script showing some capabilities of Thor and Rails templates. So let's take a look at that. This is a Rails template. So what I'm doing here is using some commands that like I think Rails has made up and some commands that are Thor stuff. So append to file, that's a Thor thing. Say, that's a Thor thing. That's basically like puts gsub file. That's letting me go into the config database YAML and rip out all those comments. There's just endless comments in that file, and I hate them. And I want them gone every time I Rails new. This adds a status route, which we have on all of our applications so that our heartbeat detector can hit them. And that's just this route method comes from it lives somewhere in Rails template land. I assume Thor doesn't know about routes. I assume this is a Rails thing, but I don't actually know. It works. This will add a route to my routes file. Random thing, that's an actual random thing that I made up so that I can show how templates can get populated. So I've got a README template in here. And I'm going to use template to take that template, that Thor template file, .tt Thor template, and output readme.md for my, because I don't like the base README that comes with Rails new. Create some files that I want created every time I Rails new, my .env, my .local, my Ruby version and tool versions, because some people on our teams are using something that will respond to Ruby version, and some more sophisticated individuals, such as myself, are using ASDF because we're polyglots, and that makes us so cool. If you don't know what ASDF is, I'm totally joking, but the tool versions.
Telling me about it.
Tool versions is for ASDF. Not 100% sold on it yet, but it seems all right. You get commands like yes, which is actually, this is forcing interactivity. It's waiting on me to respond. What I would like to remove the concerns directory. This shouldn't actually be here. I was doing this just to kind of show it, but even if I don't answer yes, this should probably just be removed. So that just looks, this runs, this is that sort of thing like where I'm running a console command, just running rmrf, anything that's a directory name concerns. That stuff was a joke. If you like writing concerns, that's fine with me.
I thought this next one was a joke.
We call them Ruby mixins where I come from, and we don't need some arbitrary DSL to do it. But if you like RSpec, this is the type of thing that like, do make a template file like this, and do these yes question marks, and like just make this easy for you so you launch these apps quickly with some opinions. Adjust your gem files with the things that you're always going to use, and then like ask a question. Hey, would you like RSpec or Minitest, or whatever? Like, and get that stuff rolling. So I want to show you this is our README, and it's just going to pull app name, which is something that's available within the Rails generator ecosystem, and then this app name README, and then random thing that I set up as a constant in that file. So I'm not passing it to this, but it's available. Yes. So I want to actually. I'm just going to do it in here. Rails new charts. Okay, so this is my Rails new, and just so that we can see, I do have a Rails RC. This isn't the one that's in my, if you put a Rails RC file in your user root of your system, Rails is going to pick it up. And so I've got some default options. in that, like my database is Postgres and stuff like that. So that's another way to configure this. But then another option is to actually pass a template when you're doing Rails new, and you can set that up in your Rails RC file, or you can just pass it from command line. If we look at Sharks, just as a quick verification, our routes file has no custom route added, right? Equals, oh, yeah. So I'm just passing template, and then I need to actually reference my template file. And you can have this like be a remote file. I wanted to point this out. It actually shows a conflict because I didn't remove the README before I set a new README, and this process is gonna be like, whoa, what do you want to do here? So this isn't one of my questions. This is the system, the Rails generator stuff, just being smart enough to be like, uh-oh, he's trying to overwrite a file. You can see all of these are my say comments, and then Thor automatically does this like pretty print of what it's doing. When you see all this stuff happening when you're doing a migration and all these things, this is Thor talking to you. Think about what I just said without context. This is Thor talking to you. That's pretty good. So we've got a conflict with README. I can enter help, but I'm just going to do yes. And overwrite, so that happens. Creating configuration files. Would you like to remove the concerns directory? Yes, sir. Now it's adding and installing RSpec for me. My Rails RC skips bundle, so the Rails command will not run bundle by itself. My template runs bundle in this scenario after I've added all the gems that I want. That's something to pay attention to because there's kind of no point to be bundling twice in your build process. So I would do a skip bundle in your default and then have your complex suite templates you're going to go home and build. Actually define all of the gems you want and then run bundler. Your app is now built. Goodbye. And if we look at Sharks 2, the sequel, get status to proc. There was another tricky thing I did in there with the gem file that I want to show where I've added RSpec Rails right here in development and test somehow. That's part of the cool stuff available to you from Thor, where I'm actually doing insert into file, the file name, what I want to insert, and then this after option, which I'm basically saying the line in there that I want to insert this thing after. So that's kind of just a brief, like, if you take nothing away from this at all, like the rest of this, like Rails templates is a thing, and you should probably look into it just so you don't have to do some of that boilerplate stuff you're going to do every time again. Especially like if you're a microservice organization, I would actually skip the template thing entirely and go much further. If you're actually launching new apps all the time, you probably want a base box that's just tuned. But anyways, oh, it's a good one.
I'm gonna get some else.
Why did the coffee call 911? Because it was mugged. Oh, okay. So this is Recrypt. It is a command suite that is basically Isaac Sloan's talk from last month turned into an app with some flourish to show some stuff off. It uses Hanami CLI as its command suite. It only actually has one command. That's my fault. I didn't have time to write a decrypt part of this. That's actually really involved and fun. If anyone wants to like tackle that, it's storing the IVs and stuff. Anyways, shows off progress bar, and I use a little bit of Thor on a template in there, and we'll see kind of how that goes. Sharks 2. It was a good app while it lasted. Do you guys remember where you were when Sharks 2 happened? Okay, so we're in Recrypt. I've already kind of set this up as something that I can just run. And I'm going to run the encrypt command within my command suite. And I'm going to give it, I've just hard-coded some bitmaps into a directory that it knows to look into. So those are the only options. I can't just like pass anything because it's not that fancy. It is still kind of a hard-coded thing. But I have shapes, numbers, and like the Git logo in there. That's my progress bar. Did you see it? Whoa, it's amazing. Here's my output. And it's going to show every file that it was working on. This is by design of what I did. So it did an AES 128 and AES 256, both ECB encryption, did CBC encryption, CFB, CTR, and GCM. Those are things just available in OpenSSL. Encrypted all of those. It also made like a fancy folder called Fantastic Scion Ghost with timestamps so that I wouldn't have collisions when I keep running stuff. This output is not, like there was a progress bar, which is a little fancy, but the rest of this is just usable output. So we can pipe that into, this is what I was talking about earlier with like the Unix philosophy stuff. So I'm running this again, but I'm going to pipe the output into awk, and I'm selecting the 5th column, Arcane Magic, don't worry about it. The idea is just I piped this same output and selected the 5th thing, which is this stuff. One of the things it also does is creates a gallery. What?
That is interesting.
Oh, I actually have this open intentionally. So it created folders for all those files. So Fantastic Scion Ghost was the first one, and Delightful Pink Shuttle. If you guys want to like get in on my how to generate the best folder names ever, I can go in depth on the lists that I chose. So these are all those bitmaps, but we also used a thing to generate the galleries. One thing I did differently was I only encrypted half the file so that you can kind of look at that. This HTML page is generated by all this code that we just used. And Fantastic Scion Ghost had one too. There's slight differences in the color mode that happens every time you encrypt, which is fun. So that's cool. And these, if you were here for the image encryptor talk by Isaac Sloan, this ECB stuff, like that's encrypted and you can totally see it, exactly what it was. Think about what that does with text versus this stuff where it's just like unknowable what that is. We got a couple other images we can use. Shapes, sweet progress bar, because you care about your user. I had to slow this whole thing down and put sleeps in there so that you could see the progress bar run, because encrypting these actually doesn't take that long. Delightful Blue Octopus. Here we go. Again, these are bad encryptions. These are good encryptions. You can tell because one of them looks like TV and one of them looks like you're bad at making an image. So all that stuff's just done. And if I don't know how it works, I just type recrypt. I'll get my commands. Recrypt encrypt takes a source BMP file. This stuff looks similar to like what I was getting with the options parser thing. I can do recrypt version. This is using Hanami CLI to generate all this stuff. I don't like that they don't show the aliases, but they make it very easy to set up aliases. So TAGV, TAG version, all this stuff is like very easy to set up. If I want to do, instead of typing the full encrypt command, I can be one of those people that just wants to type an E and not have to type all those things over and over again. That's an alias for encrypt. And we'll get into next how to set that stuff up. Okay, so Hanami CLI, most like this is like Thor and some other things. They tend to want you to have a CLI thing in your namespace. So if your gem is called Recrypt, then it would be Recrypt in CLI inside of the Recrypt module. So this right here, Hanami has this CLI registry that I put inside of commands, and then my commands are just classes that respond to call.
Those hipster CLI builders make you do so much.
They have some macros that lets you set up arguments and options and descriptions. So all this stuff we just saw on the command line was basically like me saying, this is an argument, it's required. So let's trigger that as a failure real quick. Oh, I'm just gonna type E from now on. So error recrypt E was called with no arguments, usage, recrypt E source BMP file. So that stuff, again, I'm not setting any of that up. I'm just getting that based off of argument and the fact that I required it. I pass that in and I run it through my Ruby code that's nothing to do with any of this other stuff. Like as soon as I utilize it for its command interface, I'm delegating off to where I'm back in script land and writing Ruby however I want. Register version and encrypt so that these are these commands, and I'm just pointing them at classes here. You can extract these classes don't need to be in this file. It's just a convenience because I didn't want this thing to really be that big. But they could be their own files, and they probably should be. Here's my aliases for these two different commands. Set all those up. I don't have any options or anything because this was a pretty straightforward thing. So this runs Recryptor, which doesn't do anything yet, which runs Encryptor. Okay, so here I'm using Pastel from the TTY library, and that's letting me do colors. And this one is how I'm coloring the progress bar. And I'm saying on blue, I want the characters to be nothing, but it's going to be a blue background. And on magenta, I want these dashes, but it's going to be a magenta background. I then pass those objects, these pastel objects, into the progress bar as complete and incomplete. And that's how I can say, okay, my incomplete is going to be this magenta bar. As it completes, it's going to be this blue bar that overrides it. The total length of that progress bar is whatever I want, which I'm doing all of my algorithms times by 12. That was just a convenience thing to get a decent width. This is the string that it's going to output, and then this symbol right here is what's going to get replaced with the bar visual. So this is an on blue, which is a background, but we don't have to use backgrounds. We can say like this is going to be magenta circles, and then it's going to become X's. And not compiling anything or sweet circles and X's progress bar. Take those out completely, and that's your default progress bar you get for nothing is equals just growing. So that bar, I'm like advancing it 12 steps at a time here, which was actually something I was screwing with earlier. It should move a little bit slower. There you go. But I'm doing sleeps in order, but basically you just advance for whatever a step is to you as you're moving through, you just advance as you do your work. I'm doing it more often here and putting sleeps just so we could see it because this is such a quick process. Okay. Doing command line apps, you tend to be interacting with the file system more than you might in a Rails app or web app. So learning about file, learning about CSV, learning about these other things, like that's going to be important, file utils and stuff. Ruby's actually really good for work with text and stuff from a usability of the programmer perspective, not necessarily a performance perspective, but anything you're probably doing is probably not going to matter. Like, I'm talking about like big data or whatever that is. So we're exporting images. I wanted to show the gallery. This is some more Thor stuff. So this time we're actually using Thor directly as Thor actions, which brings us a lot of those methods that I was showing earlier in the Rails template. A thing that you have to define if you're going to interact with the file system using Thor is your source root, which I'm just saying is like the same directory as this file is in. But you have to define a self.source root. And Thor's got good error messages. If you don't do that, it'll tell you, I didn't actually know you needed to do that when I started this. It told me, and now I'm telling you, like something I knew. It's not. Pretty easy, though, to set that up. I'm not using Thor as my command suite here, so I don't want to have to set up all my descriptions and stuff like that. This I'm just using as like private implementation. So they have this no commands macro that allows me to wrap methods and say, hey, don't worry about enforcing your rules about how command line apps should work and be documented on me. I'm just trying to use your template method. Like, get out of my life. So that template method, we just send it data and it's ERB. So I go in here and I tell VS Code for the 3,000th time that I want this to be ERB. This might look familiar to you if you've ever done anything. This is just me iterating through all the encrypted files. It's ERB. It's pretty sweet to just do something like this and end up with whatever you want. And you can see very easily how a static site builder can be built using these tools. Thor seems like it maybe should be used for that purpose. Markdown manipulation and stuff like that. A lot of that, Ruby's good at a lot of this stuff, and you can make those tools. I don't think I'm doing much else I want to show. Most of this is just me implementing. Oh, some more Pastel stuff in here. So Pastel, yellow, bold, that's how I'm doing the source file name. And then magenta is my links to the files. Those colors are going to vary based off your theme within your terminal. But those are like, it's using like the POSIX colors systems, whatever your theme is going to do with those values. So you might say yellow, and it's going to turn out to be red because you went into iTerm and got crazy or whatever. Yeah, any questions?
It's a good sampler plate.
There's codes available up in the presentation repo, which I will link to.
So does Thor automatically make it so you don't have to / command to execute, / whatever? Like, it exposes it, so you just call it directly on the command line. Is that Thor doing that, or is that something else? And it seemed like many of your libraries did that.
So I'm not using Thor directly for its command suite building. I'm using Hanami CLI, but what gave me that ability was actually the fact that I put it in a gem structure. Okay. I installed
because the gem was required, it's in the load path.
Well, I installed it as a gem. Yeah, gem. When you use bundler to generate the structure of a gem, you actually get a lot of this stuff like just kind of sitting there waiting for you to utilize it. And one of those is a rake task, which will make it really easy to do it. What it ultimately does is a gem install the file I'm in right now. And so you just do rake install, and it'll take that local gem structure, and as long as it's got a gem spec that can be valid, it's going to install it in the same place it would install any other Ruby gem, which, depending on how you manage your gems, RVM or whatever, it'll live in a slightly different spot. But that's how I'm using Recrypt as a command right here. Is I've installed it as a gem. As far the other thing with that is when you use these tools, you can. This is my executable file that I can set up, and I can use this. So this, in modern bundler, if you use its guidelines on how to structure a gem, it wants you to put your bin stubs in exe so that you don't collide down the line with same name bin stubs from other more important libraries. It's literally like, because you might break other more important versions of RSpec if you have your RSpec inside of bin. And RSpec and Rails are more important than your command line app, more than likely, to the end user. So it says put your stuff in exe, and then that way you won't collide when all these things come together and try to shove stuff into bin. So this actually from the get-go runs.
So your executable registers.
Yes. So it's gonna take Hanami CLI, which is this wrapper of this whole system, take my commands that I've set up in the CLI namespace, and then run call on itself, knowing what to do with all of that stuff. Thor is very similar in that you're gonna define something CLI and run Thor that way. You'll have to require it in here. And
so it's not doing any magic really, then it's just loading that file into the bin path.
Nope. Yeah. Yeah. So this package stuff, this is from running your rake install, where I've actually built out a gem binary, and stuff gets installed locally. So we looked at Thor, Hanami CLI, and the progress bar. And Sharks 2 was a pretty big deal. I remember that from the time. So these, again, are going to be in the repo, which I'll have someone that's actually in the Slack post a link to my repo. But here are some references for some documentation. Image Encryptor, thanks, Isaac, for doing that presentation. I stole your code. It was public, so I think that's fine.
So you built that, really?
What?
You built that.
Yeah. I wrote all this code because it was in Crystal, so it was real, like it was painstaking translation from all that Crystal, like Thor, Hanami, Rake. This talk's there. Again, make awesome command line apps. Copland's really smart. So if we want to do this, we can do this. A basic version, which should only take about 10 minutes, I would think, but it's up to everyone.
Well, I'd say we do. Let's give it a round of applause.
I had another dad joke.
I thought I
What did the buffalo say to his son as he went to college? He left the house for college. Bison.
Nice. Bison.
That was my favorite. I'm glad.
Why did the scarecrow win a Nobel Prize? Because she was outstanding in her field.
I saw
I can keep going.
a Spaceline app today that was super cool in the threads I saw. uni.xkcd.com. And it's pretty cool. If you want to pull it up, and maybe you can perhaps it's somewhat related. uni.xkcd.com. So it's like in the browser, and then you can do like, there are some commands there. And you could do like random, but it's like in browser command line app. that was interesting that it came up today.
Just trying to steal my thunder. Okay, so this is pretty sweet. This is just the whole.
But yeah, you can enter like in a random, and then also you were mentioning
Cursor popping. Yeah.
you were mentioning also that it, you can like wrap everything in your commands and only have certain commands and then anything else returns like a certain thing. Like if you don't have a command, you can default.
Yeah. So the command suite tools I was showing aren't really good for that sort of thing. That's going to be more like if you remember a script, it was doing hello world no matter what. It was just by its default. But if you passed options, it would greet that person or that thing like hello Ruby or whatever. So by default, it did something. Most command suites by default, what they're going to do is give you help because they're just the wrapper around a ton of stuff you can do with their individual commands. So what it would do by default, like, do you really want Git by default to try to init Git locally, or do you want to see like its default behavior should be help and some explanation of how to get more help, or like Git's actually really good to. It starts breaking down its commands and sorts them into different groups as well. So like work on a current change, you've got add, mv, reset, rm, bisect, grep, log, show, and git log by itself. Pretty good. But has a bunch of stuff. So I want to more things I can do with git log. There's options. It's going to show me some of them. There's so much you can do in some of these that you are going to have to go kind of look up the manual and stuff for some of the more fancy things. Like I want to use pickaxe to find any commits that reference Cryptor. This is going to find me that one commit that does that.
It's also the example of that interruptibility you're talking about, because like each command in the suite is, I think, implemented mostly as its own program, and the suite just kind of wraps into the output would be a separate applications.
Yeah, we actually interact mostly with like porcelain commands in Git, and some of the stuff it does deep down, like you can actually get to and start using yourself, but we interact with like things that are nicer sitting on top of all that stuff, so that we don't have to care about that stuff. And I think back in the day, you actually had to like install all of these commands sort of separately and use a different actual application for different things within Git. I'm old enough to know that, but I'm not. I wasn't using Git at that time, so I don't actually know that for sure. It's just a rumor I heard.
Why still use Subversion?
That's what I was actually using Subversion when I wasn't using. Here's a zip file of my stuff. I was using Subversion, so I put a lot of zip files on the network drive and coded that. Because of the military, that's how. Yeah, anyways, don't ever do that.
That's how we ran our studio back in 2011.
I feel like artwork is still basically done that way.
Perforce is the right answer, but nobody knows how to use it.
It's perfect.
The right answer for 5
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty.
after 5 people, right? Yeah, that's the challenge.
Are we gonna do this? Rochambeau deal?
Yeah, I thought you were going to start talking. I thought you were asking about Terrapin, so I did actually pull that up. Something we didn't show. I just want to go over that real quick. So this is Echo is the command. As I've kind of framed commands, they're actually just applications or whatever you want to call them. And then its arguments would be hello world in this case, and you can pass that in as the command, and then the arguments to Terrapin, and then tell it to what command are you going to run, and that's the output of the thing it'll actually run. And then run actually runs it. Pretty silly in this echo hello world scenario, but when we start using things like ImageMagick convert and start passing in all of these various arguments, it actually can create a much better interface to talk to those arguments and stuff from your Ruby code. And then there's good exception handling. We can rescue on status errors. If something runs successfully at the command line, it should return a 0 as an exit status code in secret. And it should return any other number if it fails. 1 is the most common because it's unreserved for anything else. There are a few dozen numbers that are reserved for very specific failures that are only from things that we don't own. So 1 is the most, like, just return a 1 if you're going to have a failure scenario. Exceptions and stuff like that within Ruby, it's just going to be naturally returning a 1 for you. What else did we talk about? Oh, don't look at that page. TTY Toolkit, I talked about progress bar, but they've got some other cool things. Table output, font. We did Pastel, which is another one of the things. Execute shell commands, they've got their own thing. I haven't used theirs, I've used Terrapin. Prompt, that's where you force into an interactive mode. It's pretty cool. So you can set up a prompt ask, what is your name, and have a default, and then this is what it's going to output when it runs. Confirmations like yes, but you can actually get into multiple choice using select. And you can sort of address multi-select, multiple select. You can have it enums. Here's like a choices scenario where you've got the whole yes, no. It's a pretty common thing to like have a series of options for your yes, no questions where you have yes and no, but also like, well, I don't know if I want that or not. Tell me more type options as well. You can collect multiple answers with it. And all this it works pretty cleanly from the command line to sort of create these interactive prompt scenarios. So what I would do in that scenario to trying to be able to do something without forcing interactive input is do come up with your sensible defaults and your convention. And if you want to have this like interactive solution, set that up as one of the options available, like via a -i flag, just like rebasing interactively. And so kind of have the sensible default that takes arguments for adjustment, but then like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I really wish Rails migrations had an interactive mode, Rails migration generator, because I can never remember the stupid syntax. So I end up like, just give me my migration file so I can go write the syntax that I remember. I don't remember how to pass you flags. I just don't. I'm not even gonna get the name of the migration right so that you can put the right wrapper around my code. There's some, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. You guys probably all remember this because normal people can remember this. I don't.
So I think you were
when I walked in, you were addressing sort of the Unix mindset, like small, sharp tools, chainable. What sort of strategies have you employed to be able to write tools like that? I mean, that's not a Rails migration, right? That's I don't know if that's a real question. I like that idea and would like to be able to think more along those lines, writing tools like this.
Okay. So I did show, like, by just being not too fancy with my output, I did have some colors and stuff, but I was spitting out text of every file that I manipulated and where it ended up, some information about it, and I was able to just awk through that and select just the thing. Those files, that I now have that list of files which could be piped into something that opens them or renames them or moves them, whatever. That's the sort of mindset of like have simple output so that you can pipe through. If you actually look at the code and how it's implemented in here, I really like pipes. Like it's something that I find most people can understand. So it works in a lot of scenarios. Request response cycle, rack, how it works is just kind of feeding this thing through a system of middleware. People seem to rock it, and so I kind of try to write code like that. So I know that you're talking about the external, but here I instantiate this crypto request, which is just an object. Then I use yield self, which is kind of modern Ruby. It's like the pipe operator. You yield that thing to a block, which encrypt files, runs crypto requests through this encryptor, and out come encrypted files, another list. I'm yielding that to generate the gallery. I'm yielding that to crypto result, which knows how to take a list of crypto files and turn them into one message. All of their messages become one message and get output. So I didn't do what you're talking about via external apps piping through each other.
Sure.
But that's literally how this whole thing's built, is like that sort of concept. And then the text that comes out of this could be piped into something else that took those files and did the gallery generation itself, right? Instead of having this do all of that stuff, I could have gallery generated from the other thing.
So rather than separate small applications, you have sort of these specific objects that do one thing.
Yeah.
Whose output can be piped into the next.
Yeah. Yeah, so I make little value objects and I just pipe them through things. And the next thing returns me a different value object. And these values do a little bit of work in the pipe themselves. Like the crypto request has a headers method and a data method. It was given the parsed file. So we've already got a binary file in memory as a string, basically. But this thing completes the parsing, so it sets the headers aside so that we don't break those, and then gets the data, which is half the file's body. And then the next thing talks to its public methods and does work, and then the next thing it's an encrypted file. This just gets instantiated with very small things, puts a little bit of behavior on them, but the app, like the surrounding service object, is kind of the thing that's taking, like, I've got a smart value object, and now I'm going to do a little bit of work with it, send it off to some other thing, or instantiate some other thing. It's a functional approach, but it takes advantage of encapsulation of objects, which I'm not handing around the raw data structures. I'm handing around these cute little packages. And that's what you can do with your command line apps. And so we did like LH-LA. It kind of just depends on what your problem is and like what parts of it you want to maybe reuse in different ways. This is the same problem that you're dealing with when you're looking at your architecture of your app as a whole for your Rails app. Like, where are my boundaries? What is a chunk that is reusable? LS and these, we tend to not think of microservices and stuff like that in the LS and grep and RM type way, because the cost of the network is something we feel pain about. But it's totally possible to make all these little things that do stuff like that. And then on the command line, it just sort of depends on what you're trying to build. If you're trying to build like a timekeeping app or something, you might have one app that just sort of lets you put in timestamps into a CSV, and those are your checkpoints. And then when you're ready, you've got another app that says, okay, I'm going to load the CSV and I'm going to parse it and convert those timestamps to this prettier picture, and I'm going to pipe that to my invoicer, little guy, and it wraps something like prawn and makes a pretty little invoice out of a PDF. And you could do cool stuff like that with like, yo, pipe, like you get to type that pipe and generally you feel really cool. So ls-la. I'm just use the awk example from earlier. So this will be third column. Sorry, I typed really bad. So that's my name. And then I'm gonna, what?
Last
So-
one. Last one's number 8.
Yeah, I just did the third column, right? Like, just as an example, I was so if I wanted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't know that 8 will actually work with awk like this. We're gonna find out real quick because those dates are, yeah. See, the dates actually count. Any space for the standard like print awk thingy is gonna count. So that would be 9. And then pipe that into files.txt. And
Yeah.
It's hard to talk about this in terms of the encryptor thing, but I can.
I think even with your encryptor thing, a sensible example would be like output the gallery.html file and pipe that into open or something like that if you wanted, right? Like that would be a sensible implementation rather than all 6 images or
Yeah.
whatever you wanted. Or pipe out that directory, everything's saved here.
So yeah, I would
Return
definitely.
just that, you know? And then you can do whatever you wanted with it.
The problem with the encryptor thing is its only purpose is that pretty gallery at the end,
Yeah.
like to just show you like, hey, encrypting images is weird. Like encryption's fun.
I think
I don't know.
your
So
example
that's
is
why,
good. I mean, I just like
that's
the-
why I look at it that way though, rather than like returning the raw images for all 6 and go and use a gallery there. Just return that gallery link and then somebody can decide whether they not. Don't auto open that for me, so I don't want you firing up my browser. But let me decide if I want to do that, because then I can pipe that into open. If it would be the right thing or whatever, right? Or pipe the directory where all that output is or whatever.
Common stuff that you might like need to actually do as opposed to like have fun doing is stuff like database backups. A lot of this stuff kind of is more in the opsy type realm, and it's like where you would traditionally be doing bash scripts. Like Ruby's actually really nice for this stuff, and some of that community has actually gone and utilized Ruby in big ways for some of that stuff. HashiCorp kind of comes out of the Ruby community. The first person to explain how rack middleware worked to me was that guy at like the Mountain West years ago. Hashimoto? No, what is it? Anyways, the founder of HashiCorp, who does a bunch of DevOps stuff like Terraform, things like that. Vagrant. He talked through the middleware layer years ago at back when Mountain West was still at the library. When that was sorry, I don't have a good example of like piping stuff, and I realized I could have built a little suite that was all separate.
It was a pretty broad, big
Um,
question. So I'm sorry.
No, it's an awesome. I'm gonna adjust that for next time I give this talk. All right, we're kind of long here, but if you want to actually, Bundler has really good documentation on how to start a gem. They have the bundle gem command well documented, and then there's actually a tutorial type documentation for a little CLI app on their site that explains how this works. But I'm just gonna do bundle gem Rocambot real quick. Not open my entire root directory. In here, you've got your gem spec, and you would just need to add one of the whatever tools that you've seen tonight that you like. You just add as a spec, add dependency, Hanami CLI, for instance. The bundle install. When you get to a point where you want to start using it via the command line, do a rake install inside of this directory, and it'll build it to your local stuff. The one gotcha there is Bundler hates you if you don't actually do these to-dos, and so it'll fail. And Bundler also relies on the fact that you use Git to manage files you care about. So it actually will only build the files that show up in your Git ls. So if you add anything after this point, after the initial Git init, you need to Git add those before you try to do a rake install. Yeah, and then Hanami CLI has a good tutorial on how this stuff works as well. I think we're probably out of time for actually going through this together, but if you want to make a Rochambeau rock, paper, scissors thing, just take rock or paper or scissors as an argument, and then have a list or an array of the same and call .sample on it, and then apply it to rules. And victory. If you want to be really good at it, don't make rock an option, or don't make paper an option for the robot. Just throw rock every time. You always win. Thank you, everybody.
I'm gonna throw my hair. I have to go, but this still only takes a few seconds. Just opening your